clean up your room.
Oh yes, that's all about cleaning your room. Have them start to clean up their external environment.
Clean that up because you can. So can you even clean up your own room? No. It's like, I don't know how you could go out and protest the structure of the entire economic system if you can't keep your room organized. Because if you can't even clean up your own room, who the hell are you to give advice to the world?
Who you talking about? Jordon Peterson? Trending #1 on Twitter? Jordon Peterson with an international bestseller? I want him to tweet something out about me in my book. Jordon Peterson, right? This is what I'm saying to you. Why the rage, bruh? You're doing well, but you're a mean, mad white man.
Individual suffering can and has and will be again rationalized and justified for its supposed benefits for the future and the group.
Okay guys, in this video we're going to be taking a deep, dark, sad, depressing look at Jordon B. Peterson. For the most part, I'll be using as a sort of template for the video a piece I recently wrote called Jordon Peterson, A Public Tantrum of Inner-Turmoil. If you'd like to read the whole piece, you can find it at counterpunch.org or as a pinned post on the Punks for Progress Facebook page. But before we get into it, I just want to point out how incredibly great the new self-titled album by Total Massacre is. If you haven't heard it, please go subscribe to Total Massacre's YouTube page and check them out on Facebook, and because they're just fucking fantastic and their new album is incredible. And to prove it to you, I am going to play the newest video from the self-titled Total Massacre album. Track's called Thoughts and Prayers.
And then when the Marxists say, well, that wasn't real Marxism, what it really means, and I've thought about this for a long time, it's the most arrogant possible statement anyone could ever make. It means, if I would have been in Stalin's position, I would have ushered in the damn utopia instead of the genocidal massacres, because I understand the doctrine of Marxism and everything about me is good. It's like, well, think again, sunshine. You don't understand it. You don't understand it. And you're not that good. And if the power was in your hands, assuming you had the competence, which you don't, you wouldn't have done any better. And even if you had, there would have been someone else waiting right behind you to shoot you the first time you actually tried to do anything good. And that's what happened to all the old guard who ran the damn revolution. Stalin rounded them all up and shot them, along with their families and millions of other people. So even if you do happen to be that avatar of moral purity that you claim implicitly, the probability that you'd get to act out your goodness in relationship to those possessed by your ideology is zero.
An avatar of moral purity. Okay, before we really get into it, I just want to address this fucking ridiculous trope from the right about Stalin is the ultimate manifestation of communism, and no matter what you do, no matter what stripe of socialist or anarchist or whatever that you are, when it comes down to it, you'll do what Stalin did, which is murdered all the actual fucking socialists because he was some weird fucking narcissistic self-obsessed asshole authoritarian. So it's not something that's built into socialism that Stalin might manifest, okay? And he even says it himself, that Stalin, murdered the actual socialists within the party, like Trotsky and so on, and a lot of so on, okay? But, sorry, this mid-level sort of nobody bureaucrat, Stalin, who schemed and connived and murdered the actual socialists within his party so that he could then usurp power, is not an intrinsic manifestation of socialism. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to cover that real quick, and now we can really get into how fucking ridiculously sad Jordon Peterson is.
Cultural Marxism.
Anyway, at the core of Jordon Peterson's narrative is the notion that cultural Marxists, which according to Peterson is essentially anyone who doesn't ascribe to his defeatist worldview, have infiltrated or joined forces or been infiltrated by or whatever by the postmodernists, or vice versa. Anyway, the short, simplified version is the class struggle, as described by socialists such as Marx, is, in Peterson's thingy, been shrouded in the postmodernist concept of haves versus have-nots, or simply the powerful versus the powerless. But at no point in Peterson's blusterous career has he managed to tell us just at what point and just what specific socialists made this somehow nefarious and sneaky transition. I mean, can he point to when, say, cats like Chomsky, Zizek, or Dr. Wolf, insert well-known modern socialists here, got together, conspired, plotted, schemed, and came up with, we'll pretend to be postmodernists, although we won't ever actually act like it, and then, voila, women will become feminazis, and white men will be then able to blame all their personal shortcomings on said feminazis? Seriously, Peterson, when exactly did that happen, and how exactly did that imaginary transition then translate into every single person on the left being somehow a part of it? It sounds incredibly fucking ridiculous because it is incredibly fucking ridiculous. At no point has there ever been a transition of or takeover of one of these two schools of thought by the other. It's bullshit. But if you tear past the surface of Peterson's rhetoric, you will find that exact bullshit assertion. Peterson believes that all liberals, progressives, social democrats, socialists, communists, anarchists, Black Lives Matter, #MeToo, LGBTQ plus rights activists, etc., have been fooled by this nefarious scheme of cultural / postmodernist / Marxist / whatever into caring about the equality they crave for all people, as opposed to them actually just caring about and wanting equality for all people. What's more, the true agenda of the social justice warriors is to make men slaves to so-called feminazis. I shit you not. That's what this hack piece of shit is crawling around the country on his lobster belly, selling to ignorant, disaffected, pissed off white boys. Profiting off of their disaffected ignorance, then in turn telling them it's social justice warriors' fault the American dream hasn't panned out for them. It's the cultural Marxist fault Sally Popular Pants won't give them the time of day. But ultimately, what it all comes down to for them is it's all women's fault. And that's where we enter his loyal stable of incels and men's rights activists. But we'll return to them later. For now, let's move on to Peterson's perversion of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey.
What do Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo all have in common with the heroes of ancient myths? What if I told you they are all variants of the same hero? Do you believe that? Joseph Campbell did. He studied myths from all over the world and published a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, retelling dozens of stories and explaining how each represents the monomyth, or hero's journey. So, what is the hero's journey? Think of it as a cycle. The journey begins and ends in the hero's ordinary world, but the quest passes through an unfamiliar, special world. Along the way, there are some key events. Think about your favorite book or movie. Does it follow this pattern? Status quo, that's where we start. 1 o'clock, call to adventure. The hero receives a mysterious message, an invitation, a challenge. 2 o'clock, assistance. The hero needs some help, probably from someone older, wiser. 3 o'clock, departure. The hero crosses the threshold from his normal, safe home and enters the special world and adventure. We're not in Kansas anymore. 4 o'clock, trials. Being a hero is hard work. Our hero solves a riddle, slays a monster, escapes from a trap. 5 o'clock, approach. It's time to face the biggest ordeal, the hero's worst fear. 6 o'clock, crisis. This is the hero's darkest hour. He faces death and possibly even dies, only to be reborn. 7 o'clock, treasure. As a result, the hero claims some treasure, special recognition, or power. 8 o'clock, result. This can vary between stories. Do the monsters bow down before the hero, or do they chase him as he flees from the special world? 9 o'clock, return. After all that adventure, the hero returns to his ordinary world. 10 o'clock, new life. This quest has changed the hero. He has outgrown his old life. 11 o'clock, resolution. All the tangled plot lines get straightened out. 12 o'clock, status quo, but upgraded to a new level. Nothing is quite the same once you're a hero. Many popular books and movies follow this ancient formula pretty closely. But let's see how well The Hunger Games fits the hero's journey template. When does Katniss Everdeen hear a call to adventure that gets the story moving? When her sister's name is called from the lottery. How about assistance? Is anyone going to help her on her adventure? Hey, Mitch. What about departure? Does she leave her ordinary world? She gets on a train to the capital. Okay, so you get the idea. What do you have in common with Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo? Well, you're human, just like them. The hero's journey myth exists in all human cultures and keeps getting updated because we humans reflect on our world through symbolic stories of our own lives. You leave your comfort zone, have an experience that transforms you, and then you recover and do it again. You don't literally slay dragons or fight Voldemort, but you face problems just as scary. Joseph Campbell said, "In the cave you fear to enter lies the treasure you seek." What is the symbolic cave you fear to enter? Auditions for the school play? Baseball tryouts? Love? Watch for this formula in books, movies, and TV shows you come across. You will certainly see it again, but also be sensitive to it in your own life. Listen for your call to adventure. Accept the challenge. Conquer your fear and claim the treasure you seek. And then, do it all over again.
The hero's tale, or the hero's journey, as illumined by Joseph Campbell, is one of taking action, engaging the world, confronting its evil righteously, and in turn learning from that experience. It's a self-reliant journey of discovery, not just to the other end of the world's greatest obstacles, but to the other end of our own inner struggles as well. And most importantly, how we take personal responsibility for the world around us and the part we choose to play or not play in it. Jordon Peterson's take on the hero's journey is a sick, sad, convoluted, self-destructive perversion
that rallies its warriors to inaction, self-pity, and reactionary anger.
So, I mean, there's rules for operating in chaos, right? Because that's when you're in the belly of the beast or the belly of the whale and you're underwater. You're in the underworld. You're in the underworld in chaos. And so that's a really cool thing to know, Joe. So imagine that the normal world of mankind is inside that dominance hierarchy where everything is going well. Because nothing abnormal is happening. You're getting what you need and you want, and your conscious knowledge suffices, right? Okay, but then something tilts and that structure no longer works. So where do you end up? You end up in the underworld. That's what happens when your partner of 20 years has a long-term affair and you find out about it. It's like you thought you knew where you were, but you didn't. And now that you found out, you don't know where you are. Well, when you don't know where you are, you're in the underworld. Right, and that's where the unconscious forces play. Those are the gods. That's why there's gods in the underworld. And people go to the underworld all the time. It's chaos and fear and depression, hopelessness and imaginativeness. It's everything. It's
and this
chaos.
realm is terrifying to people.
Terrifying and promising. Terrifying and promising, because dragons have gold. Because it's always, the unknown has two things. Just like the future. It's like, look out, it'll do you in. And look out, it offers everything to you. That's the underworld. That's why the hero always goes into the underworld to find a cave full of gold that's guarded by a dragon.
In The Hobbit, literally.
Yeah, well, and that's Beowulf, right?
Yeah,
that's the oldest story of mankind. It's really our oldest story. Wow. And so that the underworld is chaos. It's chaos, and down there's all sorts of play of possibility. And the reason the frog was the guardian of chaos is because the frog is this thing that doesn't fit into categories. You see, because it's partly water, it's partly land, it's tadpole, yet it's adult, right? So it's like a fish, and then it's like an animal. It doesn't fit. And it's things that don't fit that blow apart the categories, right? Well, that's what the transsexuals do to the category of gender, for example. And that puts you in this state of chaos. It puts you in this state of chaos. And that's what we're in now. We're in a state of chaos. And so what are the rules for operating in a state of chaos? Well, as far as I can tell, the fundamental rule when operating in chaos is tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. So, for example, if you...
For the people that want to navigate this successfully.
Yep. All you've got, that's what you've got as a shield and a weapon. And that's the guidepost. That's the way through. Well, and you see that in hero stories all the time, you know. So it's allegiance to the truth, but the truth is a strange thing. It's a very strange thing. Often the hero in a story has to assimilate their dark side before they're capable of telling the truth. Right, in The Hobbit, for example, he has to become a thief. Right, because he has to get tough. That's the thing. That's the thing. Also, the thing about telling the truth is that it's not for the naive. Not at all. And partly it's because it burns off dead wood. It's partly because it hurts people's feelings. It's a sword. So you have to be a warrior.
Wow, a truth warrior. In this time of chaos.
Right.
What emerges from this?
Right. Sometimes it's catastrophe. That's the thing about these categories. They're real. They're real. And you know, the optimists that I hear say, well, the pendulum swings and then it swings back. And I think, yeah, well, sometimes it takes 100 years to swing back, and it takes a hell of a lot of people out on the way. And sometimes it never swings back at all. So, you know, sometimes people go out to fight a dragon and it just eats them. Or it burns them, and that's the end of that.
Right.
And like, we're in an unstable period of time at the moment, in a transition period of some sort. I can't put my finger on it, but I know that that's partly why what I've been saying has been resonating with people.
That's a very, very important thing for people to hear. It's a very important thing for people to hear. So many times, I mean, here's a perfect example that people will understand and be able to resonate with. It'll resonate with them, rather. When you see people that have a lot of inspirational memes on like Instagram and Facebook, they're almost all fucked up.
Jordon Peterson speaks of the underworld and slaying of dragons et al. In the traditional metaphorical sense, of course, and in much the style popularized by Campbell. But Peterson casts his heroes as having the underworld thrust upon them, as opposed to something a proactive warrior engages purposefully. While Campbell's hero seeks out the dragon, Peterson's is suddenly confronted by it. While Campbell's hero mindfully seeks out and engages the chaos of the unknown, Peterson's hero finds himself forced into the midst of it, bereft of foreknowledge, as if abruptly awakened to some immediate existential dread. Joseph Campbell tells us that heroes find the wisdom they otherwise lack in the quest to engage the dragon, in the engagement of the unknown, in the struggle against the odds, in leaving the familiar and the safe for the dangerous and the unknown. Peterson, in his ridiculous self-help book, tells his readers not to engage injustice until they have figured out all their own personal demons. He, in fact, tells his followers that they need to clean their fucking rooms. Peterson does give his followers a dragon to fear, the social justice warrior / cultural Marxist / whatever, but he tells them only that they must not stand for it anymore. It being equality for all otherwise marginalized peoples, but more specifically, women. What we thinking people with an ability to empathize understand clearly to be simply the struggle for equality for all, Peterson sees as a threat to some imaginary, historic, divine role of patriarchy being all things somehow equal under threat. What Campbell recognized as the fight for injustice and wisdom so intrinsic to the long story of the search for the betterment of the broader human condition, Peterson sees as all he and his followers should be ultimately crusading against, or, more precisely, cowering from and crying about. Peterson tells his followers they must tell the truth. But anyone espousing a truth that challenges his own becomes the embodiment of the dragon, of chaos, of evil itself, the social justice warrior. What this glaringly hypocritical and emotionally stunted hack is doing is couching his self-victimizing, defeatist view of some so-called heroic patriarchy in the ageless, inspirational tales of the true hero's journey. Peterson has taken a timeless understanding of self-sacrifice, courage, honor, and universal truths for all people, regardless of gender or ethnic or national origin, and regurgitated it as some justification for specifically white men to feel like suffering victims of some fucking imaginary oppression. And I, frankly, fail to see how this is not, on some level, a purposeful perversion of Campbell meant to sell Peterson's own self-loathing to his followers, thereby justifying it for himself on some even deeper, more repressed level.
A 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1.
tried to do it there, it's sort of in layman's terms what we're talking about here, but can you give us some more? Can you elaborate about incel?
Journalists across the country and around the world were grappling with a new term in the wake of the Toronto van attack, one most of us had never heard.
On Facebook, police say he wrote the incel rebellion has already begun. Incel is a term meaning involuntary celibate.
Many of those who call themselves incel identify with this man, some even praising him for acting on his anger over being turned down by women by going on a murderous rampage 4 years ago.
In a video he posted before the attack, Roger spoke about women rejecting his advances.
Self-described incels mostly congregate online and often fit a similar description.
Mostly comprised of young men, most of them being white.
The subculture even has its own terms.
Chads and Stacy's refer to regular men and women who are having sex.
The common themes being anger, alienation, and misogyny.
Involuntary celibates, or incels, are what the name clearly implies: guys who can't get laid. But upon closer examination, we find something far less benign, something frighteningly angry, dangerous, reactionary, and violent. These are people who not only believe that it's not their personal fault that they can't get laid, but that the entire world has literally conspired against them to make it so. Incels believe they have been oppressed by normies, by what they call Chads and Stacys, also known as people who get laid. And they are convinced that any and all violent outbursts against society are justified as manifestations of that oppression. They are, in short, violent, sex-deprived terrorists. As should not be surprising, incels see no correlation between their deep-seated misogynistic loathing of society in general to their own inability to attract a loving partner. Incels disassociate their own reactionary misanthropic tendencies from the responses such behaviors tend to garner, and they then replace it with an even deeper hatred and loathing of society in general. Incels, therefore, are fertile minds for the likes of Peterson and his victim card version of the hero's journey. And in light of Peterson's recent support for the immensely disgusting concept of forced monogamy, the world of terrorist incels have flocked to him accordingly in droves. The sad cesspool that is Jordon Peterson. The astounding level of mental gymnastics behind literally all of Peterson's ideas, the manner with which Peterson routinely justifies his notions on easily debunked interpretations of various schools of thought, the way with which he refuses to be saddled to any specific position, the way with which he posts live streams of him sobbing over the so-called plight of men, the way with which he perverts the nature of the hero's journey, the way with which he attracts the most grossly reactionary, misogynist, and misanthropic elements in society are all manifestations and symptoms of something deep, unaddressed, and repressed on the part of Peterson. I am obviously no trained psychologist, psychoanalyst, or clinical diagnostician by any stretch of the imagination, but I can clearly deduce by this man's public behavior that he is deeply emotionally disturbed and hurting. This is a man who clearly has no command of his emotional faculties nor any want to discover the root cause of his emotional instability. Or maybe he in fact does know the cause of his sad, depressing struggle, but is unwilling to heed the hero's call to confront it? It seems obvious to me that his outburst in relation to C16 and the subsequent 15 minutes it has brought him, not only brought him one hell of a lot of cash, but the spurious air of validation for his lack of personal accountants, volition, and actions towards self-betterment. I am convinced that Peterson is smart enough and educated enough to understand that upon any substantive scrutiny, his entire shtick falls apart as reactionary and counterproductive to actual personal growth. But he's making money. He's selling books. He's making waves and getting lots of attention. He's milking it. And that brings me to my most personal and possibly most damning of assessments of Peterson. I have reached the conclusion that Peterson feels justified in his lies. To be clear, I am asserting that Peterson doesn't actually believe his own garbage and lies, but he does believe he deserves to profit from them. In other words, it's Peterson's turn, and he's going to get him some. The world has shit on Jordon B. Peterson long enough, and it's his turn to do the shitting and get some fame and recognition. It's a gross exploitation of suffering, ignorant, and confused young minds for the purpose of personal self-fulfillment. Jordon Peterson is the very worst kind of white privilege, reactionary, selfish pieces of crybaby crap the West has to offer. And this writer is convinced he knows it and doesn't care. I hereby invite Peterson to prove that he is not knowingly inspiring a generation of dangerous, reactionary, incel terrorists in the wake of his sad, deluded quest to fill the unaddressed and depressingly emptier sides of his otherwise pathetically unhappy existence. Shame on you, Jordon B. Peterson. Your new suits aren't worth any of the carnage you are knowingly causing, and Joseph Campbell would be utterly repulsed by your want to slather his legacy in the depressing, reactionary, crybaby, white privilege, cesspool of shit that you have built for yourself. Now, check out some fucking Iggy Pop.
Hitchhiking, pick me the fuck up! Ocean Drive, and everything was made for
looks through his window inside. He sees the thing he knows are his.